Hey everybody, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon Podcast. My name is Simon Olney, I'm a professional triathlon coach, and in this week's episode I'm going to help you go from an occasional bike rider to a confident road cyclist. Now this is something that a lot of people really struggle with. They decide, I'm going to do a triathlon, so they get their bike out of the shed, they might sort of spray some WD-40 onto the chain, get themselves in some kit and they go out for a ride. They're going to get back into cycling. And as they do, they'll be riding along and they will have a bullet train go past. It will be either a group of cyclists or a solo road cyclist on this space age bike will go flying past them, looking like they're barely trying, or they might be coming the other way and give them a bit of a nod. And these people, they look like machines. They look like they're on another level. It looks like they're not even trying as they fly past them on the hills, or they, glide past, come the other way looking cool as a cucumber. And somebody can be sat there on their bike, sweating away, rocking from side to side with their bike, thinking, what am I doing wrong? How can I become more like that person? And the same goes on race day, where you can be riding along feeling like you're doing everything you should be doing. And then these people go absolutely launching past you. So I'm going to be looking at different equipment. Largely, a lot of this episode is going to be based on equipment. It's going to be on choosing the right bike. It's going to be looking at the right kinds of accessories that you need, how to set up the bike. We're also going to be having a look at a bit of training as well. But in a sport like cycling, the equipment is so important. Now, it's not quite as important as some people would have you believe, mainly those who work in the marketing departments for big bike brands. But it's still absolutely massive. So we're going to break it down and we're going to go, right, I'm going to take you for somebody whose background in cycling is all, I've been out for rides occasionally on a hybrid bike with the family, or I used to do a bunch of cycling before and then getting back into it. But how is it that I can get to the level that most people, that they associate to be triathletes are going to be riding at? The first thing that I'm going to look at, because it's the big sexy one, is the bike itself. And this does make a difference. Now, primarily, it's the type of bike that you're after, which is going to have the biggest impact. So if you have a bike at the back of the shed that you wheel out because you're going to start training for a triathlon, you have this bike that you used to ride in the past and you get it out of the shed, there is a good chance that this is going to be what's called a hybrid bike. So this is a bike that can be used both on-road and off-road. The upside to this is that you can ride on the road and you can ride off the road without needing sort of different bikes to do so. The downside to this is that bike is going to be crap on the road and it's going to be crap off road. And it hopefully won't be that expensive, but it will have tyres that don't have enough grip to be able to really allow you to confidently ride off-road, especially in any damp conditions. But they're going to be too wide and too lumpy to actually be really effective at riding on the road. And we are, at the end of the day, triathletes. We're going to be racing on the road, so we need to get better at riding on the road. So the first piece of advice that I have for you is not to look at anything that can be used on-road and off-road. I want you to look at road bikes. Now, I'm not going to be touching on triathlon bikes here. These are bikes which are specific to the sport of triathlon, which are only generally for relatively advanced triathletes. I want you to be looking at a road bike which is much cheaper. I mean, they're still more expensive than your average hybrid bike, but they're much cheaper than triathlon bikes. They are actually lighter, they are easier to ride, they're more stable, there's less of a learning curve to them. They are slower, but if you are just getting started out in triathlon, you don't need a triathlon bike, okay? You just aren't going to have the confidence to ride it to its full capabilities. And I think that a good, 90% of people who own a triathlon bike will also own a road bike. One that they can do shorter rides on, ride in the off-season, riding conditions that aren't suitable for riding an expensive triathlon biking. So we are focused on road bikes here. Now, the way to identify a road bike, for the most part, you do get some flat bar road bikes, but the vast majority of them have dropped handlebars. And these are some that many might consider to be sort of racing handlebars. So they're much narrower than sort of the bars you might get on hybrid bikes or mountain bikes. And they have after the handlebars sort of reach out to sort of to the sides, they then bend around, and there's this bullhorn shape almost that goes lower than the handlebars. And the idea here is you have three positions to ride in. The first one is riding on the hoods, where you have access to the brakes and to change your gears. Okay. This is a relatively relaxed position. Now, how it is that you have the bike set up will determine how aggressive or how relaxed that actually is. But if you want to get a bit more aggressive, you can actually, instead of holding onto the hoods, hold onto the what we call the drops. So that curved bit of metal we call the drops. By holding onto that, you can get yourself lower and a bit more aerodynamic and a bit more aggressive. In most cases, this is going to be less comfortable and probably not suitable for long durations. But for short durations, if you are on the flat, it can get you a little bit lower, make you a bit more aerodynamic, make you faster, while still giving you access to the brakes and to change your gears in the most part. However, when you are down on those drops, your access to the brakes, you're still going to have it, but you are going to have much more leverage over those brakes, and it is easy for you to apply too much front brake and go over your handlebars. Ask me how I know. So you do need to build up time on the drops if you want to spend time there. Or alternatively, the third hand position is when you're holding onto the tops. So when you are holding onto the horizontal part of the handlebars, much as you would if you're riding a mounted bike or a hybrid bike. But you won't have any access to the brakes, because the brakes are much further forward. So people don't generally spend time on the tops unless they're really stretching their back out, or they're riding up a hill where they don't need access to the brakes. Most bikes will tend to be a featherweight relative to what people are used to. So if you have, again, sort of a hybrid bike or a mounted bike that you've been riding in the past, this will be an awful lot heavier than a road bike. And most people, when they come from this kind of very generic cheap bike that they're used to riding, maybe got it from Halfords or even Argos or something like that, or Walmart if you're in the US, when they go to a bike shop and they pick up their first road bike, they go, wow, it's so light. It may actually be around about half the weight of that other bike. And a large part of that is due to the frame material, but it also comes down to the suspension. So the frame material, the vast majority of road bikes are going to be made out of one of two materials: aluminium or carbon fibre. Now, I want you to get it out of your head early on that carbon fibre is out and out better than aluminium. Because a good quality aluminium frame is preferable to a cheap carbon fibre frame. That's because it can be lighter. The way that you treat the aluminium, depending on the quality of the metal that you use, it can be lighter than carbon fibre. It is less prone to damage than carbon fibre. I'm going to go into that in a minute. Which means that a aluminium bike, it can be ridden with a bit more sort of reckless abandon, shall we say, than a carbon fibre bike. I know lots of people who will use the Cannondale CAD 12. So the CAD line of bikes are made of aluminium. And Cannondale is a very good bike manufacturer, but they make a line exclusively of aluminium bikes, because there are a lot of people who just really like that. The ride on aluminium, however, it is harsher. A carbon fibre bike is going to absorb a lot more of the imperfections in the road on a bumpier road than a carbon fibre bike, which is going to feel a little bit harsher. If you are looking at an entry-level bike, so if you're looking at getting the cheapest road bike you can to get started in the sport, which is not a bad way to go, that's how I started out. They tend to have an aluminium body and carbon fibre forks. So that is what holds your front wheel pinned in. It's that bit that drops down. That long part of the frame, they're called forks, because, well, they look like forks. And this will often be carbon fibre to help absorb some of the impact, and sometimes the seat post of the bike will also be made of carbon fibre to help dampen the vibrations. But when you start looking at really high-end bikes, when you start looking at spending, £1,500 or about 2,000 US dollars on a bike, you're probably going to be looking at carbon fibre. Now, there is a myth that carbon fibre is a fragile material that's going to break on you. And this couldn't be further from the truth if you use the bike how it's intended. Now, the way that carbon fibre works, it is essentially sort of a plastic at the end of the day, and it is woven in such a way that it's designed to be incredibly strong, stiff, durable, if the carbon fibre is absorbing impact or damage in a specific way. So if I'm riding my carbon fibre triathlon bike that I have downstairs, if I hit a pothole with that bike, my wheels are a much greater risk of damage than my bike frame, because it is designed to be able to absorb forces in that vertical plane very easily. However, if I were to get myself a clamp and I were to clamp it around my carbon fibre bike for some reason, it wouldn't take an awful lot of force for me to be able to tighten that and to be able to break the carbon frame. The reason for this is it's designed to absorb a lot of impact in one direction. So, the kind of forces you expect a bike to accept, hitting potholes, is designed to be incredibly strong. Probably stronger than aluminium, to be honest, in many ways, if you are applying force in that plane. But if your bike crashes on its side, it doesn't generally expect there to be force that is crushing the tube in that way. Or, it's not designed to absorb force in that way. It's designed to absorb force in a way that's designed when the bike's being ridden. Then you do have a slightly higher risk of there being a fracture in the frame. Now, here's the plot twist. If you have a steel bike, which if you have an old bike, there is a chance it could be steel. This material is much heavier. But you can go down a blacksmith's and you can go, my steel bike has got this damage, can you fix it? And they go, no problem. They'll get a blowtorch and they will fix your bike. With carbon fibre, if your frame cracks, you can take it to a carbon fibre repair specialist and they will be able to repair that carbon fibre for you. If you take your bike, your aluminium bike, to a bike shop and say my frame's crap, they'll go, I'm sorry, you can't really fix aluminium. If the frame's in warranty and there's evidence that the frame has failed, then you could get a warranty claim there. But if it is part of a crash, and they'll be able to look at the bike and they'll be able to tell you whether that is a potential warranty claim or not in the bike shop, then you could find yourself in trouble. So in some cases, the carbon fibre frame is quite easily damaged. But if you are riding it in a predictable fashion, if it is not, if it's not being part of a massive crash, then chances are it will actually be just as durable, broadly speaking, as an aluminium frame, but not as durable as a steel frame. Now, you can also get titanium frames. These are very expensive, and they're generally used for bikes which are bespoke bikes that are created from scratch. High-end manufacturers selling these very expensive bike frames. I'm not going to cover this here, because I don't recommend that you get a titanium bike frame if you're in this position. Now, I also touched on suspension. And the suspension on a bike is something that we will often go for out of a sense of, oh yes, that would be good. That will help absorb some of the bumps on the road, on the trails, whichever. And if you have a hybrid bike, chances are it has suspension. Because it's designed to be ridden by people in lots of situations, and for them to be able to do so comfortably. Riding off-road or on a very bumpy piece of road without suspension is uncomfortable. I'm going to be honest. If you are off-road, you will need, and you are, I ride my road bike off-road because I'm a very experienced cyclist. But if I'm going over some bumps or some dips, I would actually be stood and I would be slightly standing sort of just with my bum a few inches above the saddle to allow the bike to be able to hit all of those bumps without giving my genitals a bashing, basically. Now, the downside to this is that you have an awful lot of weight with suspension. And when you are riding on the road, as you're going to be doing the vast majority of your riding as a triathlete, on the road, it's going to slow you down. And this is because every pedal stroke that you make, that force is going through the bike and some of it is being lost as it goes through the springs of the suspension. When you ride a bike without suspension, you'll feel it's an awful lot snappier. You'll feel that it responds an awful lot quicker to acceleration. It is so much lighter because you're not dragging all of that suspension around with you. And I really highly recommend, unless for some reason, it could be if you are, say, like in your 70s and you suffer with some sort of health condition that means sort of with your wrists maybe that it causes you pain. If you find yourself riding on that kind of surface without any suspension, sure, maybe there's some mileage there. But for the vast majority of people, do not look at suspension if you are looking to compete in triathlons. Because what may seem like a good idea of, it could be good to have that. When you're there on race day and everyone is overtaking you, you're going to be looking at all of their bikes and notice that none of them have suspension. And if you're all but the very most casual of triathletes, you're going to look at that and going, I made the wrong decision. I need to get another bike, one that doesn't have suspension. And I really want to avoid you having to go, I've bought the wrong bike. This was a massive mistake, because a very expensive mistake to make. Another big factor when you're shopping for road bikes is the geometry of the frame. So this is, amongst other things, the distance from sort of the saddle to the handlebars is a big one, sort of how upright or how stretched out you are, as well as the exact sort of way that each of the front and the rear triangles are designed, the wheelbase of the bike. All of these are going to have an influence on how the bike rides. Now, you have, broadly speaking, 3 types of road bike. You have a performance road bike, which is the kind of bike that is focused on being as light as possible and very aggressive. And this is the kind of bike that will be ridden in the Tour de France. So on most stages in Tour de France, certainly at least, the mountain stages, it's all about being as light as possible. And you can set it up to be super aggressive. So that if you are in your 20s or your 30s, you can really get yourself wrapped around this bike really low, really fast. But for most of us, especially as triathletes, that's not what we want. What we want instead is a road endurance frame. And these are just a little bit more forgiving in their geometry. So you'll be riding it in a slightly, and I mean slightly, more upright position. But you have a lot of control over this between the height of your saddle and the number of spaces that you have under your handlebars. That can really help ensure that you are going to be riding in the correct level of aggressiveness, the correct level of comfort for you and your goals. So you do have flexibility here. But there's only so comfortable that you can make a road performance frame, and there's only so aggressive that you can make a road endurance frame. But for the vast majority of triathletes, I'm going to say, look, especially if we're looking at doing 70.3 and Ironman, we're not doing a crit. We don't want to get ourselves super aggressive for an hour or two. We want something that we can spend prolonged periods in relative comfort riding. The difference in weight really is quite minimal. We're probably talking less than half a kilo in most cases. There is a third option, which is a road aero frame. And this is a road frame that is designed to be as aerodynamic as possible. And you hear lots of people, including myself, talk about the importance of aerodynamics in triathlon. So a lot of people, they'll go, well, I don't want or I can't afford a full triathlon bike, so why don't I get a road aero frame instead? This is a massive trap. The reason for this is that the actual benefits in aerodynamics are absolutely marginal. They really are very slim. Now, who are road aero bikes designed for? Well, they're designed for sprinters in the Tour de France and other professional road races for a start. So if you are launching for the line alongside, 4 or 5 other sprinters and you're all trying to get to that finish line first, then having that marginal improvement in aerodynamics can be the difference between first and second. Weight doesn't really matter in this situation. It's you fighting the wind shoulder to shoulder with a handful of other athletes. And that is a major component of a road aero frame. Or equally, if you are a stage rider and you are looking to win from the breakaway, if there are only 3 or 4 of you who are sharing the work, then having a more aerodynamic frame when you sit on the front of a flat stage and you're working away, that is the kind of thing that can give a really very marginal gain. But if you look at how close some athletes get to winning the stage just before they're caught at the finish line of a professional bike race, having that improvement of aerodynamics to the handlebars, to the frame, all of that, it can make a difference. But in triathlon, not only are triathlon bikes legal, but clip-on aero bars are legal. And clip-on aero bars are an absolute must for any serious triathlete. They are incredibly powerful, they are incredibly cheap, and they will get you in a really, really fast position if you have these clip-on aero bars. The downside to the road aero frame is that the handlebars themselves are often optimised for aerodynamics, so they have this teardrop shape on the handlebars which you cannot mount clip-on aero bars to. So you find people went, I paid a premium for a road aero bike that I now cannot attach clip-on aero bars to. So now I have to be sat in an upright position while other people on cheaper bikes with round handlebars can clip on their aero bars and can ride much faster than I can. What gives? I've been sold a bit of a pup here, haven't I? Now, some aero handlebars that you can get special specific clip-on aero bars to use with them, but these are few and far between. If you are a triathlete, I ideally want you to have 2 bikes in your garage. One comfortable road bike that you can ride for hours on end with no problem. Sure, something a bit light, but comfort really is the main thing here. And this should be a bit cheaper. And then a race bike, a triathlon bike. Once you've been in the sport for a few years and you think, this is what I want to do. This is super important to me. And I want to get the best bike I possibly can. That is when you look at getting a triathlon bike. And you can ride your triathlon bike on the turbo trainer or outside when you're in race season, and you can use the road bike for everything else. If you try to get a bike that is being both of those things, it's not going to be particularly good at either. Another major component here is the saddle. And road saddles are very intimidating. They scare and put off a lot of people. And you know what? I understand it. I get it. You look at them and you go, yeah, that doesn't look comfortable. Does not look comfortable. I'm going to get myself a big squishy saddle, and that is going to be much more comfortable because I don't see how I could ever ride around on something like that. How could that possibly be comfortable? And if you look at saddles for triathlon bikes, it gets even worse, but we're focused on road bikes today. Now, the reason that so many road bikes are hard like that is because road cyclists will wear padded shorts, and this is much more comfortable than riding around on a big cushy saddle. Because if riding around on a big very soft saddle was the most comfortable efficient way to ride, everybody would be doing it. Instead, rather than having this big, really heavy saddle, which creates large amounts of pressure on, that area down there, which is especially a problem for the ladies. What we have instead is we have a sort of a harder saddle, but we have those soft bib shorts with all of that padding in the bib shorts, so that pressure is, rather than being spread out over such a large area, that pressure is actually over a narrower area. And the thing that I get people to think about in this situation is, you think if you sit on a bar stool, where you're perched on the end of a bar stool, you can probably sit there all night, happily, chatting with other people at the bar. Whereas if you were to sit down on a really big, really soft sofa, and I think, we see these, some pubs have them, these really deep sofas that you almost sort of fall into. It's really comfortable for a short period, but then you find yourself shifting around a little bit, trying to get yourself comfy. And that's because there is all of that pressure that is spread out over that large area on your bum, and it's just that bit uncomfortable. You can't spend large amounts of time there. So it's comfortable for a short period of time, but over a long period of time, you are much better off perched on the edge of something that's slightly harder, but with the softer bib shorts. So I'm going to get touch on bib shorts later. In fact, actually, it's taking me 26 minutes to get through this. I get the feeling this episode is going to be a two-parter. I'm not even a sort of a fifth of the way through my notes yet. But we are going to be looking at, a sort of a saddle that is nice and hard. Not overly hard. It's going to have some cushioning in it. But the main element that we're going to be looking at here is going to be focusing on the bib shorts when it comes to comfort. Now, when it comes to choosing a saddle, that is a bit of a tricky topic I'm going to touch on in bike fitting later on. So to summarise all of that, you're looking for either an aluminium bike or a carbon fibre bike. A road bike, preferably road endurance, is the geometry that you're after. And I would always recommend, when you're choosing the bike, you go to a bricks and mortar shop where they get you measured up. Now, what they provide there is what you get when you buy the bike is a bike sizing, not a bike fitting, it's a bike sizing. And they will sit you on a jig, they'll measure things such as your inseam and your height, and they will help pick out the right size of bike for you. If you buy your bike online in the hope of saving a few quid, you could end up with a bike that is too small, that is too big, that's the wrong geometry for you. And if you can't get comfortable on it and you go to a bike fitter, they're going to look you up and down and go, yeah, you bought the wrong bike. And I know that it can be tempting, I could save a few quid by going online, but it's a lot more expensive if you buy the wrong bike. So I really urge you, because most retailers, they'll do a price match. If the same bike is available in the same colour, in the same size, same model, same everything, identical for a lower price, the vast majority of retailers will price match that. So we need to be looking at this and going, okay, what's the most sensible thing to do? Is it to try and save £75 on a bike by getting it online that could be completely the wrong bike? Or do I go into a store, get some advice, see if they'll price match it? See, I might be able to get the same price anyway, and get the advice that you need on all that, as well as developing a relationship with that bike shop. Now, the relationship with your bike shop is not to be underestimated. If you are a known face, if you've popped in there several times whilst buying your bike, and you go up to the counter and you go, oh yeah, I got this bike from you sort of about a month ago, but I've been having sort of this issue with the shifters, it's just not changing gear as well as it used to. And they're going to go, all right, give it here, let's have a look. Okay, we'll just tighten this little barrel adjuster to the right, there you go, good as new. No, don't worry about it, no charge, it's fine. Whereas if you get your bike online, you're going to be paying labour for that, and it could end up, you could end up paying sort of 40-50 quid for what's essentially a 30-second job that you have to book into the workshop and all of that. So do not underestimate having a good relationship with your local bike shop. Next up, let's look at the accessories that we're going to need to budget in. And this is a big mistake that people make when they're buying a road bike, is that they blow all of their budget on the bike itself and not leave any money left over for accessories. First one we're going to look at, is helmet. Now, I do recommend, even if you have a massive mushroom-shaped object in the back of your shed, you think, oh, I've still got my old helmet. Helmets, the styrofoam, it will degrade over time. The cheaper helmets, they're going to be really hot and sweaty, especially the older ones. They're not going to provide as much protection, and they are going to make you feel a bit silly. If you get yourself a new helmet, it will be a lot lighter. It will have, it'll be much better when it comes to keeping your head cool when you're riding in warmer temperatures. It will be lower profile and it won't make you stand out quite so much. And I know it's not all about blending in and looking the part. It's not that at all. It's about having a product that is going to protect you the best that it can, whilst also providing good levels of ventilation. Now, when you buy a helmet, you need to have a look at making sure that it fits you correctly, which again is why you should get one from a bricks and mortar shop rather than buying online. Because if you have a helmet that's the wrong shape, it's not going to provide the protection that it should. You can get helmets that are more for people with rounded heads. You have helmets for those who have slightly more, like myself, more elongated skulls. Put it on your head, move it around on your head. Does it have just a little bit of movement side to side and front to front? Then that helmet's probably the one for you. If it slops around a lot, it's not really the right helmet. Now, some people, they still have it under their skin that they, you can't tell me what to do. You can't make me wear a helmet. And in most countries, that is the case. Yes, there is no law about riding with or without a helmet. I don't think there really sort of should be one either. But if we are going to be riding on the road at high speeds, and when you consider that, we are not in control of what other people do around us, we could be doing everything absolutely right. But if a drunk driver were to go into the back of us and we end up thrown off our bike, we can suffer significant head injuries that could be fatal, and a helmet could be the difference between surviving that or not. People can do all sorts of mental gymnastics, trying to find ways to justify the fact that they shouldn't wear a helmet. But if you are going to be racing in a triathlon, you will need to wear a helmet. It is not a question. You need to wear that helmet, otherwise you will be disqualified. You'll not be able to take part. So we really, really need to make sure that we are getting a helmet that fits, that is comfortable, and we're not afraid to spend a bit of money. Now, you don't need to be spending £200 on a helmet. That is not what I'm suggesting. But around that kind of £70, £80 is going to get you a good helmet that is going to be comfortable, that is going to fit well. And when you're riding around, you're not even going to know that you're wearing it. Now, we do have three types of helmet. We have what I call sort of performance helmets. We've got road aero helmets, and we've got full aero helmets. A performance helmet is one that is really lightweight, that is designed for maximum ventilation. These are the kind of helmets that people will be riding in the Tour de France where it's really hot and they want to stay as cool as possible. You also have a road aero helmet, which has less ventilation, but it is faster. The design of it has less ventilation, but the air flows over it better. These are really good helmets for triathletes. Now, if you are racing in a really sort of hot environment, and you're not all that fussed about your time, maybe stick with that performance helmet that has more in the way of ventilation. But if you want to go faster, if you've been putting in all this training, you want to dot every I, cross every T, really make sure that you're doing everything you can, then a road aero helmet is the way to go. The especially enthusiastic among you may even look at a full aero helmet, but these are expensive. You are looking at £200, £250 plus for these helmets, and they're not an awful lot faster. They are a bit faster than a road aero helmet, but they also have less ventilation, so you're more likely to overheat whilst wearing one. I would encourage people who are looking to really qualify for Kona, going as fast as they can, to look into this as an option. But the vast majority of triathletes, I think that a road aero helmet is all that you need. But equally, if you just want to go for a performance helmet that has maximum ventilation, that is no problem. Next up, we have bottles and bottle cages. So we need to have water within easy reach of us when we're riding. You will see some people who will be riding around on mountain bikes, on hybrid bikes, and they'll have a rucksack, and they'll have a camelback bladder, and they will be drinking from a straw while they're riding. And This is okay, but you're not going to want that on race day on a triathlon. It's going to get really sweaty, that backpack on you as you're riding along. It's going to feel uncomfortable. Instead, and it's also difficult to refill it, I should point out, instead you want to have bottles on your bike that you can drink from. When you get to an aid station, you can chuck the old bottle, grab a new one, without having to stop and refill that. Now, you're going to need bottle cages to store the bottles in. There are various places that we can put these bottle cages. So we have the down tube, which is the tube that goes sort of roughly from the handlebars down to where your pedals are, which is called the bottom bracket at the where sort of your pedals meet. You can have one on there, and that is the most common place to have a bottle cage. You can also have one on the seat tube, which is the tube that runs from your saddle down again to that bottom bracket. Which is a little bit harder to reach, but is also a popular option. The downside with these is that by putting bottles here, is that you are slowing yourself down because it's not aerodynamic. The wind is hitting these bottles and flowing around them. What most triathletes will do instead, and again we are talking relatively advanced triathletes here, but if these are the kind of people trying to emulate, then we do need to consider this, is they'll have a bottle between their handlebars. So that will be, they'll probably have aero bars, and a bottle will be sitting between their aero bars that their arms are rested on, and they'll be taking that bottle and they'll be drinking from it as they're going along. That way, because the bottle is between those bars there, it doesn't really slow us down. The other option is having a bottle or bottles behind your saddle. So this allows you to keep them well out of the wind, and you reach behind you, retrieve your bottle, have a drink and put it back. But if you are just getting into road cycling, this is going to feel quite intimidating. So you need special kit, all of this to get these set up. It's not cheap, it's not easy, you need to learn to ride with it. So for us as amateurs, amateurs who are just getting started in cycling, having it on the down tube and the seat tube is fine. Don't overthink it. But if you do want to get faster, if you do want to continue pushing the limits of your triathlon, you may want to consider having these bottles sort of elsewhere on the bike. But when we're looking at bottle cages to buy, if we're just looking at regular bottle cages, you don't need to get a really lightweight one. You can spend a lot of money on a super lightweight bottle cage. Don't worry about that. Triathlons are generally held on flatter roads than most bike races, sort of road bike races are held on. So weight isn't nearly so much of a factor. Just go for something cheap and cheerful. These should be one size fits all, these bottle cages as well, which is important to remember. And sort of just get them, and they will be able to bolt onto your bike frame. But also double check when you get your bike, or when you're even looking at bikes, where it is that they have bottle mounts on. Next up, let's talk about tyres, and this is something I've banged on about in the past on this podcast. Tyres make a massive difference to how well your bike rolls on the road, the rolling resistance it generates, as well as your puncture protection and your levels of grip. If you get yourself a good pair of high quality tyres, you could be looking to pay about £50, $70 for a tyre. Sometimes less, sometimes significantly less if there's a deal on. But these are going to have much better puncture protection. They're going to be much smooth. They're going to give you a much smoother ride, be a much more efficient way of applying force to the road. You're going to lose much less relative to a cheaper tyre with a harder rubber, or something say like a mountain bike tyre or a hybrid bike tyre, which you really would lose a lot of power through. But you can save significant energy with these, and when you go around the corners, you're less likely to fall off. It really is a win-win. And you will want to make sure when you have these tyres that they are pumped up to an appropriate tyre pressure. Now this, if you are struggling at riding on the road and wondering why everybody's faster than you, tyre pressure is probably a good reason for that. Now some people who are like outrageously casual cyclists, if you have a sort of a bike path, or people sort of regularly ride bikes through sort of a town centre, If you go and you sit there for 10 minutes and you watch everybody ride past and you look at their tyres and how soft their tyres are, there's a good chance that the majority of people have a very soft tyre. It will be quite squidgy. You sometimes see people almost sort of bouncing along with this tyre that looks almost half flat. And they're really not going very fast because they're not topping up the pressure in their tyres. And how much pressure you put into your tyres does depend on a number of factors. For most people, I'm going to recommend probably a minimum of about 60 psi. Very few people are going to be wanting anything less than 60 psi in their tyres. Not many people are going to be wanting more than 100 psi. Now, heavier riders need higher pressure, whereas lighter riders can get away with a lower level of pressure. The pressure that you have is also going to influence sort of how well the tyre rolls. So if you feel that as you're riding along, that you're losing power as you're pedaling through it feels that you're riding through treacle, you're not really going anywhere. Put some more pressure into the tyres. But if you feel every single little imperfection in the road and you feel like you're being bouncing along and that your undercarriage is really getting a battering, try taking some pressure out of the tyres, because having that really stiff, rigid tyre is going to have a real negative effect on the ride quality. I can't give you an exact pressure to aim for, but try experimenting with different pressures and see what works for you. Now, when you buy a road bike, it probably won't come with pedals. And this is a real shock to a lot of people. Hang on a minute, I spent a lot of money on this bike. It doesn't even come with pedals. What kind of a joke is this? Well, the reason is that the vast majority of road cyclists will use a clip-in system. So they will have the feet are going to clip into the pedals, which means that you can get a better rounded pedal stroke, so you get a small amount of propulsion from the upstroke rather than just stamping down on the pedals all the time. It also allows you to accelerate hard without worrying about your feet flying off the pedals. There are lots of different standards, so you've got Shimano SPD, Shimano SPD SL, you've got Speedplay, you've got Look Keo, you've got time pedals. There are all sorts of different types of pedals out there, and the reason manufacturers don't include pedals is because they don't want people to pay for something they're going to take straight off of the bike and stick straight in the bin or on eBay. So you're going to need to get some pedals, and there are, broadly speaking, there's three main pedal sort of systems that I'm going to talk you through now. So you have the sort of off-road pedals and cleats, and these are quite small, they're quite recessed cleats, and when you look at a cycling shoe that has cleats, because you will need a specific cycling shoe to use cleats, the cleat itself is going to be small and it's metal and it's recessed in the sole that allows you to walk around like normal. Now, I've never used this system before, but I've heard that when you walk around, you can feel the cleat in your shoe. It's not the kind of thing that you can cycle to work and then spend all day walking around at work in these cleats with no problem. That's not the case at all. But it's a lot easier to walk around in relative to road cleats. Now, this is Shimano SPD SL, or Look Keo. My God, these are sort of more tongue twisters than they should be. I'm just getting tired. But they instead, the cleat is a big rectangular shape. It's a 3-bolt system, and it sticks out of the bottom of your shoe, and it really makes it quite awkward to walk around in. Once you get used to it, it's okay. When you learn to roll your feet and to feel how you walk down steps and you land on your forefoot, it can become a lot easier. But when you are learning, getting used to these cleats, they can be very uncomfortable. So why would you choose these big road cleats that stick out underneath your shoe rather than the recessed cleats that sit within the sole of the shoe? Well, from what I've never used those sort of off-road cleats that are recessed. People I've talked to, when you're riding them, you do, because the cleat is that much smaller, you get more of a pressure build up on that part of your foot. It normally sits around the ball of your foot. They're less adjustable as well, but the biggest issue for us as consumers is that when we're looking at road cycling shoes, there are very few road cycling shoes that use those off-road cleats. So if you go to a bike shop, or you're looking online, which I think is a terrible idea when it comes to buying shoes because they're so specific to everybody's individual feet. When looking at shoes, then if you go, oh, I've just got standard SPD, they'll go, oh, well, we've got like 1 or 2 shoes that you can have a look at, as opposed to an entire wall full of cleats that have the 3-bolt system. So I do recommend that people look at the sort of, if they're just getting started out, look at the road cleats as opposed to the off-road cleats. There's a little bit of a learning curve there, but it does give you a better platform. There's a less pressure build up and there's more of a choice of shoes, and you need to get pedals which are going to match that. Now you can get SPD SL pedals, or you can get Look Keo pedals. Whichever you go for, it doesn't make an enormous difference. Have a look at what's available. Actually, another benefit of the road pedals is that if you get a really cheap pair of road pedals, they'll still be decent. The bearings will still last. Whereas if you get a cheap pair of off-road pedals, they're not designed to last quite as long. They are generally perceived to be a bit of a lower quality product. So you'll be a lot better off in the long run if you have road cleats. And also, if you do want to use triathlon shoes at some point in the future, which are shoes that are designed to be used for triathlon, that have more ventilation to them, that are easier to get in and out of with a big Velcro strap. Again, these are like 1%ers, but if you do really want to get into the sport, these only use road cleats, sorry. Now, I did allude to a third standard. This is known as speed play. And these are a sort of a more expensive type of shoe and cleat, really, which is largely recessed, like an SPD. But it has very flat pedals, and they are favoured by sort of many people. They're supposed to be quite adjustable, quite a bit of float in them. I've never used them. I've heard plenty of people who've spoken quite highly of them, but they are on the pricier side of things. May be carried by certain bike shops, and you can inquire with the salesperson about speed play and whether you think it might be the right option for you. And I want to reiterate that this whole cleat and cycling shoe setup, it is completely optional, but all the cyclists are going to be blasting past you on the course. They are going to be riding with cleats, with cycling shoes for, the optimum efficiency, because it really does give you gains. But if you are a very nervous cyclist and is still not particularly happy riding on the roads, if you are spending, at least some reasonable money with the bike shop, and you say you're not ready for those pedals yet, they might throw in a pair of flat pedals for free for you, or for a very nominal fee. If you just want to get used to sort of building up confidence, changing gears, all of that on the road first with some trainers on those flat pedals, that is absolutely fine. And I coach people who have done some events, very early events with that. So there's nothing inherently wrong with it. But I bet you that all the people who are going to be past you like you're standing still, they are going to be running cycling shoes and cleats. Now, once you've decided on the kind of cleat that you're going to use and the kind of pedals you're going to use, you then need to get the shoes. And cycling shoes is a bit of a dark art, because so much of it is about the fit. And I really, really strongly advise against just ordering shoes online, unless you already know which manufacturers suit your feet well. If you're new to this, go down to a bike shop, try some different ones on, find the ones that are right for your feet, in the right size. You need to make sure they have the right kind of cleat on them for what it is that you are using, sort of that the system that you're invested in. You also need to make sure that it has the right kind of tightening system that you want, that it's not too narrow on the feet, that your feet aren't bumping up against the toe box, but neither is there, too much movement in there, because if you have too much space at the end of the shoe, then you can end up with your toenails getting damaged as they move around and everything in the shoe. The heel cup, you need to make sure the heel cup isn't too tight on you. It really is, a nightmare. And when I worked in a bike shop, serving customers who are after shoes is probably my least favourite item to sell, because I knew it would probably be a minimum of sort of 15-20 minutes back and forth to the stock room. If you've got these half a size smaller, can I try those on? Let's try these with some insoles. It really is a very involved process, and by just blindly buying some cheap shoes online and getting them delivered, you do run the risk of just being uncomfortable and unhappy when cycling. And if you go down this route of, well, I get myself a nice squishy saddle and I get some cheap cycling shoes and this, and I'll just ride around in running kicks, I don't want to invest too much, I don't want to look silly. This all combines to being quite it can be quite a miserable experience. It can be uncomfortable, it can result in sort of levels of pain and discomfort. And if we are trying to ride faster, this is counterintuitive. So it is worth taking the time to go down, even if they don't price match, even if you're paying £10 more than you would online, just to make sure you're getting the right shoe for you. Now, when we are out on the road, we are going to want to carry some essentials with us. So we're going to want to take a puncture repair kit with us. Now, ideally, you would know how to use this. I really would encourage someone after they've been cycling for a few months to learn how to fix a puncture, because it's really not as difficult as people make it out to be. But even if you don't know how to use it, if someone can be there who can help you when you're at the side of the road and you're looking at your puncture going, how on earth do I fix this? If someone comes along and goes, are you right there? And you can say, oh no, I've got a puncture. And they go, well, let me have a look at it for you. And you can say, oh, but I've got some tyre levers and I've got a spare inner tube and some patches, and you've got the bits that they need. That means that the cyclist who's coming to help you isn't going to have to sacrifice their spare inner tube that they're riding with to help you at their own cost and inconvenience if they get a puncture later down the line. So you should be carrying these things around with you. So assuming that you're running inner tubes, well, even if you're not running inner tubes, even if you're running tubeless, it helps to carry a spare inner tube with you so that you can stick it in and pump it up even if you're running tubeless and it fails. You're also going to need some tyre levers to get the tyre on and off the rim, some sort of small tyre levers. And if you're running inner tubes themselves, I do still carry around a small puncture patching kit. I'll always default to using an inner tube, especially if I'm riding with others, because I don't want to be sat there for 10 minutes with my little bit of sandpaper and my puncture repair kit, really hoping that there's going to be a good enough seal for it to hold and it won't just puncture again a few minutes later because I didn't do it properly. I will just whack the new tube in and go. But I always have the patches in there just in case I puncture both tubes. I get one puncture and I put the spare tube in, the spare tube punctures again. I have the patches to fall back on to get me home. But to be honest, when I get home, I nearly always just chuck the patched tube because I know I'm not particularly good at patching these and they always tend to puncture again. So I would just stick a new tube in for my peace of mind. Especially if we're getting close to a race, we can't afford to end up sat at the side of the road with all of our training and hard work going to waste as we wrestle with a puncture that we could have avoided if we just had a fresh tube in there. You're also going to want to carry with you a multi-tool that has at least Allen keys or hex keys as they're known, a variety of those, to allow you to tighten up bolts that come loose or any issues that you need to solve like that. Super useful. Adjust cable tension perhaps. Again, it's worth having these even if you don't know how to use them yourself, because someone such as myself could be out and spot you at the side of the road, stop to help, and if you've got the tools on you, it makes it an awful lot easier, especially if I'm in my car or walking at the time. You will also need to make sure that I highly recommend that you carry what's called a quick link around with you, and that your multi-tool includes a chain tool in there, because this will allow you to repair a broken chain. If you have a chain tool that allows you to remove one link of your chain and a quick link which allows you to replace that link of the chain without many tools, then that is going to be really, really helpful, because it's going to allow you to be able to, complete your ride. If you don't carry these spares with you, you could find yourself at the side of the road in an awful lot of trouble. So go to a bike shop, ask what things it is that you need to bring. They may have some other recommendations. You'll also need a pump as well. Always carry a hand pump. I have a hand pump that also takes CO2 cartridges. So use those CO2 cartridges if you're in a race, if you're trying to get yourself back on the road really quickly. But broadly speaking, always having a pump on you is the best way to go, just in case. You've always got that as a backup, because you can misuse the CO2 and you can end up with the CO2 not actually filling the tyre. And if you've only got 2 CO2 cartridges and you fluff them both, you're in the broom wagon heading back to the start of the race because you can't continue your ride, or you're stranded in the middle of nowhere if it's training. Once you have this kit, you will need something to carry it around in. So a saddlebag is my recommendation. There are some, some fancy solutions you can get for certain bikes, but let's keep it simple. This is a bag, sort of a fabric bag for the most part, that sits underneath your saddle that you can put all of your spares into. Now your pump, you will likely need to have that attached to your bike frame itself, or underslung to the bottom of the saddlebag is another way to do it. But these are going to be really useful to help make sure that you can carry the kit around that you need without having to fill your pockets with these bits every time you go out for a ride. Also reduces the risk of quick links being, sort of lost in the washing machine or something like that. You keep them all in that one place. That really is a bit of an essential if you're going to be going out for riding. I know some people who swear off of saddlebags, they think they're ugly, but we're triathletes. We should be pragmatic rather than road cyclists who are all obsessed with the image of the bike. Now, as well as your pump, your mini pump that you're going to be riding around with, you will need a track pump at home. When I first started cycling, I thought, you know what, I don't need to get that big. I've got nowhere to put it. I'll just get a small hand pump. But you just won't be able to pump your tyres up high enough. You will be sat there, and they're exhausting to use. They're not very ergonomic, and you will find yourself buying no matter how little space you have space for a track pump in your house, in your flat, in your room. It really is an essential for road cycling to get yourself up to these efficient tyre pressures that you're going to need to be able to ride efficiently. Now, the subject of lights for road bikes, it does cause some division, I'll be honest. You get lots of people who swear that they'll never touch lights, that they're ugly, they don't belong on a road bike. For me, I believe that everyone who is riding on the road should be running a flashing rear light. The reason for this is it just makes you that more obvious. It makes you easier to spot for anybody who is out, driving and maybe not really paying attention to what's going on around them. They see the flashing lights. Oh, what's that? Oh, it's a cyclist. And then they think about the overtake that they're making rather than just kind of going to autopilot and maybe close passing you. So they are useful for attracting attention. You will need something more powerful if you're riding at night, probably one that has a steady beam as well as the flashing one. Now, the front light, I do encourage people also to run one of these in the day, because if somebody's at a junction looking left and right, again, a driver who is seeing the flashing of a light is going to stop and go, oh, what's that and how fast is it moving? If you're riding at night, you need a steady beam as well, because the flashing light is very good for catching people's attention. It is not good, however, for helping somebody judge the speed an object is moving at. So you have the steady light to be able to give somebody an indication how fast it is that you're moving, and the flashing to gain somebody's attention. And if you are driving somewhere there is not street lighting, you will also need to have a the steady light will need to be quite a powerful one to illuminate the road in front of you. Now, when you're illuminating the road in front of you, don't fall into the trap of pointing it at the ground in front of your tyre, because that's not going to help. Because by the time that you see a pothole or obstruction in the road, you'd have already hit it. So angle it slightly up the road, but not to the point where it's just blinding drivers without actually illuminating any of the road. You do need to find that sweet spot. If you are riding in dodgy conditions, so it could be wet really, or if the roads are especially sort of poor quality with lots of leaves and dirt and salt and that on them, you may want to get yourself some mud guards to help protect your bike. If there's a lot of mud around, I should add that as well. Now, for road cyclists, there doesn't tend to be a huge amount of mud on the roads, but they will still help keep any water off of you. If you're riding along without mud guards, in the wet weather, you are going to end up with a spray pattern up your backside and your lower back of all of this water that gets flicked up off of your wheels. And if you are riding in a group with other people, it is common courtesy to run mudguard to stop you from flinging bits of dirt and water and that into somebody's face behind you. If nothing, as well as it being, thoroughly unpleasant, you also get an awful lot of diseases and that potentially that you can get obviously on standing water on the road. If you go through, past a farm, there could be lots of manure on the ground because, they move the cows and the cows need to use the toilet. And if you're then spraying that in somebody else's face, that's not particularly nice. So that is my recommendation there, is that you look at getting some mud guards for those sort of wetter rides or the muddier rides. Now, there are sort of three types of mud guards you can get. You can get those that attach to the frame, or with like a special mounting kit, but not many triathlon bikes or road bikes will come with these mounting areas because they're not designed to be sort of ridden and raced in those conditions. So what you're going to need in those cases is you're going to need some clip-on mud guards that normally use Velcro, or they sometimes use sort of plastic brackets that you manually attach them to the frame with. These are a bit more of a fiddle than the ones that you mount onto the frame itself with the mounting bolts, but you can get there in the end. It's not too much of an issue. The third type of mud guard you get is the aptly named R-Saver. Now this is a small wedge of plastic that goes in behind your saddle, well sort of just under your saddle really. And it saves the worst of the water from being sprayed up your backside, but it won't save other riders from having all of the water thrown in their face. So it's fine for solo riding, but if you're group riding, you would want to have a look at some longer mud guards. Most serious cyclists will ride with a cycle computer. Now this, for me, is a lower priority for a triathlete than other upgrades. So having a cycle computer in front of you, it means you can follow a route, you can plug a route into it, and you can follow those directions, which is really useful. But the downside is that, well, we already have a watch. Chances are we have a cycling watch. Sorry, not a cycling watch, a triathlon watch, a Garmin, a Coros, a Sunto, a Polar, an Apple Watch, something that we record our swims, our cycles and our runs on. So we're essentially purchasing an additional device just so we can have this information in front of us while we're riding. Now there is some mileage in this. If you are training properly, and we're going to touch on training in next week's episode, I've decided that this is going to be a two-parter. We're going to be having a look at training in next week's episode. If you are riding to power targets or heart rate targets, it's useful to have them there in front of you. But this really is more of a luxury for triathletes. If you know the route that you're riding, if you've got your watch that you can look down on every now and then, if you're not doing something super structured, you probably don't need to be spending money on a cycle computer. However, if you have a clear race plan, if you are going and that you need to follow, if you are going out and you're doing longer rides on newer routes, if you're exploring the local area and you want to have the route in front of you to follow, then a cycle computer is a nice little upgrade. And they're not horrifically expensive, but again, if we are just getting started in the sport of triathlon and we're taking our cycling seriously, we're spending quite a bit of money. There's no getting around that. And the cycle computer is just something you can save for, a few months down the line if you want to. I mean, I think I was cycling for like 4 or 5 years before I got a cycle computer. It's definitely a nice to have. Now, for our cycle computer to give us useful, interesting data, we're going to need cycling sensors. So these are sensors that are going to record your power. So that is how hard it is that you're pedaling, and it's quite an expensive upgrade, but it's based in either your pedals or your crank arm for the most part these days. Get some of those and they will record your cycling power, and it will be displayed on your cycle computer screen. You can also get a heart rate monitor. Now you can set your triathlon watch to record your heart rate to broadcast that data that can then be sent to the cycle computer. Now the data from the wrist-mounted heart rate monitor, as most of us know, really isn't that good. But what it does do is it does give you something to work off, but I would recommend a chest strap that would give you accurate data, especially if you're training to heart rate. As well as a chest strap, we are going to be probably wanting to get a cadence sensor to see how fast we're pedaling. Now, if you're buying a power meter, that will include a cadence sensor with it. But if you're sort of saving on the power meter for now, then you can get a cadence sensor relatively cheap. It will just tell you how fast it is you're pedaling, so you can get an idea of whether you need to increase or decrease your cadence. Somewhere between 80 or 90 for most 80 to 95 for most triathletes is absolutely fine. Anything over 95, you're probably pedaling a little bit too fast. If we go much below 80 or certainly under 75, we probably need to increase our cycling cadence. So, touch on that a little bit later in the next episode. But we are going to have an idea with a cadence sensor of how fast it is that we're pedaling, and that we will be able to sort of analyze that data afterwards and see if we can gain any learnings from it. You can also get a speed sensor that sits in your rear wheel that will show you how fast it is that you're traveling. Honestly, I'm not sold on these. I don't think these are especially useful, because you have GPS with your cycle computer that will track how fast it is that you're going with the head unit. And in addition to this, the fact is that speed isn't really an overwhelmingly useful metric. So if somebody were to do a bunch of riding, say, indoors, if they were sort of riding around a track, they might want a speed sensor to be able to see how fast it is that they were going when they don't get any GPS signal. If somebody was doing sort of riding through some like thick forests, for instance, on a gravel ride or an off-road ride, or even some road rides, you can end up with this really dense overgrowth above you, canopies. Then yeah, there could be some use in it there, but I really don't think it warrants the extra cost, and it's just another thing to have to think about, another battery to have to replace every now and then. So speed sensors, you can get them sometimes bundled with, you can get like a cycle computer with a cadence sensor and a speed sensor. It's okay, you might as well get that bundle for the cadence sensor if nothing else. But I really wouldn't push people to say, oh yes, you need to get a speed sensor. It's not going to make that much of a difference, because speed for cyclists primarily, it really is a bit of a vanity metric. What's going on with their heart rate and a cycling power output, going to touch on that next week, is going to be far more interesting. Now, the final sort of accessory upgrade you might want to consider is looking at wheels. Now, wheels are very expensive because they have to be stress tested. You have to ensure they're of good quality. They're not going to buckle on you, but they also need to be lightweight. So it really is quite hard to, and expensive to create a wheel like that. I generally recommend against getting the really cheap Chinese wheels that you can get off the internet, because they really are an unknown quantity. And if a wheel fails on you on a descent, you are in trouble. So wheel I would recommend against for the time being, unless you really do have a blank checkbook, because for the cost of sometimes less than one wheel, you could get an entire year of coaching with me with one of my coach training plans. Details are down in the show notes if you're interested. But they are going to be really expensive, and the gains they offer, they aren't going to be massive, and you can get far, far more for your money and the effort invested from getting, sort of training, coaching, just riding your bike more often than dropping a couple of grand on some fancy wheels, because they really aren't going to make an enormous difference. So I think I'm going to wrap this episode up there. And I've actually decided I'm going to turn this into a 3-parter. Now, I'd like to think of myself as an optimist, but the thought that I could get through all of this that I've written down here in a single episode is a little bit optimistic. So what I've got for next week is that I'm going to be looking through group sets. We're going to be covering cassettes, chain sets, gear ratios, your chains, how to shift gears, brakes, disc brakes versus rim brakes. You're going to be looking at electronic and mechanical group sets, where your money goes when you're investing in these and on better bikes. You're going to be looking at bike maintenance, about how to fix basic mechanical problems, things to look out for, servicing and the like. And then the week after that, in part 3 of this series, I'm going to go through different clothing, so the kind of clothing you might want to wear, different types of clothing that you can sort of purchase for different conditions. I'm going to be covering bike fit, so how to get a bike that fits you properly, and we're also going to be covering the basics of training. We're going to be going over heart rate and power and different training models, all of that, and covering aerodynamics and the like. So yeah, this is quite a meaty series. So again, sorry if I got your hopes up and you thought you'd get all the answers to your questions in one episode. But I figured that 3 1-hour episodes is a much better way to tackle the subject than 1 3-hour episode that, let's be honest, not many people are going to want to listen to. So if you enjoyed this, if you want to hear the other 2 parts of the series, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss the other 2 parts, because that would be embarrassing. If you really enjoyed it, please leave me a rating and a review. if it's really helped you sort of get started on your cycling journey. And I wish you the very best with all of your training and your racing until this time next week, where I'll be back with part 2. Take care now.